And who's going to be picking up further?
I'm going to be dialing down into the specifics.
Yeah.
So for those of you who know me, I'm a real pragmatist. I don't do theology and I don't do all that lofty stuff. I'm in the practical details. And so you obviously had Ryan yesterday and you had Matt, and it was great. But I'm going to give you some just practical details. Just so a little bit about me. In my previous life, I was a high school English teacher. And so I did that for 10 years. And then I stopped teaching because we were going to have kids. So Anna arrived, and then when she was 6 months old, we came onto eldership here at Common Ground and sat in eldership meetings, which were not the most organized and efficient, shall I say. And so my natural tendencies jumped in, and I just started organizing things, because that's what I do. And I did that as a volunteer for many months and years, and then I came onto staff and have been part of the staff team here. I have many roles, different hats, but one of the things I try and do is coordinate the bunch of guys who call themselves the congregational leaders. Herding cats is what I call it. But so I've learned a lot about how to try and maximize that time. I've actually flipped my session around, and I'm going to start with a session on finding, cultivating, and leading volunteers. Because, I know Matt touched on that yesterday, but I think we can spend a little bit of time here first. Then I'm going to go into some of the staffing practicalities and some of the strategic organizational stuff, and just kind of see how we go. So let me start by saying that Google is a wonderful thing. And if you want to know anything about recruiting volunteers, you just type in recruiting volunteers in church, and you will get over 5 million results on how to do that. So feel free to go to Google and read all those articles. So there's a lot of information out there. And how I got to this information was a lot more kind of practical. I interviewed a whole lot of people who are involved in ministry life, in working with volunteers, from our special events teams, worship, next gen, and we had let's brainstorm what we've experienced, what we've learned, and then I kind of put that all together. So it's a much more pragmatic approach, but I think it will help. Okay, so let's start by talking about how you find these wonderful volunteers. Ooh, how do I do this? So let's have arrows. Okay. How do you find these wonderful people? And across the board, this is the challenge. They're there, but how do you get to them? And so a simple strategy is just to think what, who, and how. So to spend a little bit of mental energy there first. So what? What are the roles? What are the tasks? What is the sphere that I'm needing help in? And to actually spend a little bit of time crystallizing that in your own mind. You want to consider what's really important versus what's just nice to have. Like, this is essential to our mission, and this would be nice, but it's not so urgent right now. Also consider in the short term and the long term. So right now we need someone to help facilitate our kids ministry. But in the long term, what we want that person to do is to build a team. So actually, that helps you identify the need right now. It's looking for someone who's actually going to build a team. So just spending a little bit of time clarifying the what you're trying to do. And then the who. Who am I ideally looking for? What kind of skills should they have? What kind of spiritual gifting should they have? What area of expertise should they have? Or do I just need someone who will show up? And they don't need any skill, they just need to arrive. So then I'm looking for someone who's got a lot of time on their hands. Also consider season of life. So for example, in my kids ministry, what I think would be helpful is to recruit students. So let me look at students. Or in my moms ministry, what would be really helpful is recruiting grannies. So let me look at the grannies in my congregation who've got time on their hands to work with moms. And to just spend a little bit of time thinking through the who. And then finally, how? How do I approach these people? And what's the best way to recruit them in? So there are a number of different ways, and they're different, they're effective in different ways, so we're going to go through them. And at different times you'll use different ones. So the first one is this upfront call. We literally stand on the stage and you go, hey everybody, we've got a need in kids ministry. Now, what's great about this is that because it's coming from the stage, there's something about the stage that people perceive importance, they often perceive urgency, they often perceive value because the person on the stage is calling for help. So what is great is that this is often the quickest way to make people aware of the need and to get people responding to the need, and it communicates that it's got leadership backing because you're making the announcement. But often, either you get hardly anyone coming, or you get a whole lot of people coming and they're not quite the right fit for this, because there's no like filter. So although you might get a response, it might not be exactly what you want. But this is effective, especially in the beginning. Say when you're about to plant and maybe you need a core group, and you go, we've got gaps in this area, and this area, and this area, and this area, and you actually just need to do kind of a big call and a big sign-up thing. Even in these moments, what's important is to still try and make it personal. So you're not saying go and sign up on a list, or just go give us your details because we want to use you. You say, come and chat to me. Come and chat to the kids ministry person. Go to the desk and there's someone there who will have a conversation with you so that you're still keeping it. Okay, so that's the first one, the upfront call. The next one is probably the safest one. If this first one is the quickest one, this one is the safest one, and that's the direct ask. Okay? So someone goes to someone and goes, I think you would be fantastic in our marriage preparation ministry. Would you consider it? So what's great here is obviously it's a connector person who is directly asking someone, and so that makes it very personal. So we see this gifting in you. We see that you're great. You've got a heart for marriage. You've got a heart for shepherding. You've got a heart for young couples. And what's also great here is you can recruit specifically, often these are those behind-the-scenes things that maybe people aren't even aware of. They didn't know that we had someone coordinating hospitality, or they didn't know that there was someone who makes phone calls on a Monday to all the guests who came on a Sunday. So what's great here is you're quite strategic because you're specifically approaching this person because you feel like they'll be a good fit for this thing. Okay, so that's the direct ask. The third one is what I call the magnet effect. And this is, through example, you can recruit other volunteers. So one of our worship leaders said this to me. She said, excellence attracts excellence. We had great musicians and sound people just sitting in the congregation, or they were serving in other areas because they couldn't handle our style of music or the ethos towards music. The vibe that we're playing for the Lord, so anything goes, and we don't have to work too hard. Proper musos take their skills seriously, and they will only want to be involved in teams that have similar values. When a band plays well, that's when I get emails and requests to join the bands. So people are just shining in their area of serving, and I think often this is something like worship, where there is a real skill involved, and how that actually draws people in, because they go, I want to be part of that, there's life and there's energy there. Okay, the fourth, what are we now, fifth? Gosh, I'm not taking notes, he's just memorizing it. Okay. I feel like you're so used to the rugby ones. I send you these notes. No, you have to pay for these ones. At least the slides, maybe. Okay, the match, this is a lovely one. This is where you take the volunteer opportunity and you take this person and you match them beautifully. So this is when you know the person, okay, and the other one kind of started with the need and then you fill it with the person. This one you say to this person, who are you? What are your skills? What are your interests? What are your giftings? And then you go, okay, I know exactly where you should serve. So what this requires is a real knowledge of the person and a real knowledge of what makes them tick, what brings them to life. So this takes a little bit more time. And the best way to do this one is to have, just to make people aware so that they can keep their antennas up. So one of the things that we try and do in Common Ground, every time someone comes into membership, they will have a coffee with an eldership couple, okay? And part of that coffee is to hear their story, etc. But part of that coffee is meant to be, who are you? And what are you, why has God added you to our story? What is your gifting? Where could you possibly serve? What's helpful also is if you equip those people with information beforehand. Elders, do you know that these are the 4 areas that we currently have a deficit of volunteers in? And as you go into these DNA coffees, keep your radar up for someone in hospitality and someone in kids. So that's really helpful. What you also want to do here is use the people who are aware, so your life group leaders, your community or your area leaders, keeping them in the loop. We've just lost a key volunteer in our sound ministry. As you go visit small groups in the next while, as you connect with people, won't you just keep your antenna up to see if God's miraculously and beautifully provided the answer to our need. Okay, so that's the match one. It usually takes a little bit more time, but obviously now you're slotting people right in where they're going to feel fulfilled and where life is going to flow. And then the fifth one is the word of mouth one. And this is when your volunteers start recruiting for you, because they're serving and they're finding fulfillment and they're enjoying it, and so they help to find other volunteers and they bring a friend along to help serve in that ministry. Now, one of the things that we talk about this as replication. So we often say to our volunteers, yes, your serving is great, but what's also great is when you replicate yourself, and so that other people are drawn in. And sometimes we can think that replication means, okay, so I'm a great kids ministry person, so what I need to do is replicate another great kids ministry person. But actually the replication can be, I'm a person contributing and serving in the life of the church, and that's what I want to replicate in someone else, even if it looks different for them. So it's more about the value, and I'm modeling that value. So in my small group, there's someone that I'm trying to encourage to step into contribution and the life of the church. Their area of serving might be something completely different to mine, but I've actually replicated myself, because of me and my example, someone else is also serving. Okay, so those are the 5 different ones, just to go over them again so that Garth can catch up because he didn't take notes. The upfront call, the direct asked, the example, which works as a magnet effect, the match, and the word of mouth. Okay, so what I want you to do is, just as you sit in your tables, Garth can talk to himself, think about a time when you were recruited to serve in some area, okay, as a volunteer, how it happened, and you might be able to match it to one of these descriptions, you might not, and consider whether that was an effective way of drawing you into the ministry or not. Okay, so think about a time when you were recruited, how did it happen and was it effective? Okay, have a chance to chat to each other. Okay, so what's obviously great about that little clip is just a reminder that our volunteers are all people. And they all have a name and they all have a story. And so a lot of our cultivating and making a sustainable volunteer team is actually just treating people like people. Rick Warren, or Taryn did what did he do? He went to something at his church, and Taryn takes copious notes, and one of the sessions they were in was about recruitment of volunteers and working with volunteers. And Rick Warren said, often when you call like for a volunteer opportunity or you ask people to sign up for things and you get into a room, often you're more concerned about who's not in the room, because you thought, oh, I thought Bob would come, or I thought Mary would sign up for this. And you forget about actually interacting with people who have signed up and who have shown an interest and who have said, okay, here I am, use me. So just a reminder to focus on dealing with the people and make sure you know people's names. So one thing that came out when I was chatting to these ministry leaders is they said, so often it's just important to just recognize the person behind the task. We were speaking in the gap about how you can recruit in a way that makes people feel valued, or you can recruit in a way that makes people feel like they're currency. Like you need them to make your church work, and so you're like, I need you, come and be part of helping this happen, rather than the person feeling valued because they have a contribution to make. Sure. So one of the things that one of our team leaders did is she would connect with her team, volunteer teams worked with a team leader structure, and she would connect with those team leaders for coffee every so often, and she would purposefully not speak about the ministry or the area, but just to hear how they were doing, and that really helped. And also the other one to really focus on in this is in your communication. So sometimes we can communicate in a way that honors the person, and sometimes in a way that dishonors the person. So there were 2 examples here. The worship band, basically what happened is they needed to move someone from one band to another, which often happens. But it was done simply by moving their name on a roster, and then the roster got emailed out, and this person was like, whoa, what just happened? I went from this band to this band, and rather to phone ahead and say, this is what we're thinking, this is where the need is, we'd love you to move over and serve in this space, we need your strength here, we need your skill here. So the one way is I'm seeing you as a person, and the other way is I'm seeing you on my roster and I'm moving you across. The other example of this was also in the worship ministry where there was a lady on the sound desk who was pregnant. And so in the administrator's mind, they were like, okay, well, she's pregnant. Obviously, she's going to have a baby, and so we need to take her off the roster. But she didn't actually have that conversation with the lady, and she just took her name off the roster. And this lady was upset and offended that her name had just been removed without a conversation that actually said, we're going to give you a season of rest, or you let us know when you're ready to come back and serve, or we're closing the season and releasing you happily. But just no communication communicates something. So always make sure you're quite intentional about that communication. We also want to continually remind people, in order to keep our volunteers, maybe we're dealing with people, to speak about significance. And often our volunteers do end up playing like smaller roles, but to keep them looking up, to reminding them that they're serving God, they're serving the kingdom, they're advancing the kingdom, and their small role is part of something bigger. And to just keep the significance levels high. So one of the ways the best ways we've found to do this in Common Ground is what we call huddles. So before an event, so say we're dealing with a special events team who are serving a dinner. You get everybody together and you just paint a vision for what this dinner is. We're not just serving food. We go, these are some key leaders in the room. Once a year we gather them together and we have a dinner that we hope will enable them to connect relationally. We'll give them some input that inspires them for the job. Thank you for being here. Thank you for serving this moment. Now all of a sudden they have a sense of, okay, this is what I'm part of. I might be serving and clearing tables, but actually I'm part of this leadership moment or this vision injection moment. And then what we try and do afterwards is have another huddle. And preferably there's some story to tell. So, and sometimes what we've also done with this is in the next time you huddle, you say, guys, we just want to give you some feedback out of that last event that you served at. During the prayer ministry time at the end, this is what happens. You know, this healing happened, or this person came forward for prayer, and just so that they're seeing the fruit of the event or the fruit of the ministry, and not just the endless, relentless serving. So to really use those moments well. And two more things under this is, one is strategically thinking about high impact moments. So this is when can I use a moment and really maximize it? So our next gen team do this really well. Every now and then they gather all the leaders from across the different age groups and ministries. They get them together. There's some kind of a celebration moment. Maybe it's a meal, maybe it's whatever. And they use that time to tell the stories, to train, to envision. And it's a high impact, high energy moment. How can we maximize this? We're not just calling people to a night of training, which maybe people go, no, actually, I'd rather not be there. But we're trying to maximize this moment. So that's one. And then the other one is kind of a high challenge moment, where you actually can go to your volunteers and say, this is a big thing coming. So think of like a holiday club or something like that, a ministry trip, a mission trip. Say, and you're almost saying this is a big thing, this is a challenge, and you are getting their ownership because they want to lean into making it happen. So you're recognizing that it's a big ask, but you aren't going, oh, it's a big ask, I'm sorry. You say, it's a big ask, let's all lean in. So it's just the way of framing it that's a little bit different. Okay, the other thing that we've learned helps with sustainability is the idea of creating teams as much as possible in serving, so that people are always alongside other people and not necessarily serving on their own. Also thinking of ways to build community as people serve. So if they're going somewhere to serve, like in a social justice outreach thing, let's travel in the car together. Let's stop for ice creams on the way, or let's just do something that makes this fun and relational. One of the things we do with our special events teams is they serve the meal, and then usually in our events there's the meal and then there's some kind of input. And while that input's happening, our special events team behind the scenes are having dinner together. And because they serve in the same team, they're getting to know each other, they're getting to share each other's lives, and actually eat together as part of the event. And we've even initially, we all ate like whatever, roast chicken, and then the special events team had pies and cokes, you know? And now we've said, no, they eat what we eat, everybody eats the same meal, because that communicates value. So here is the meal that you're serving, and now you also get to enjoy that meal together. So that's been like one of the things that we found has helped. Also to empower the teams as much as possible. So it's one way of increasing ownership when they feel like they are the ones actually making it happen. So for example, in one of our smaller congregations, they got the teams to write their own briefs for what it meant to be on this volunteer team. So they had a setup team, and the setup team wrote, this is what it means, this is how you deliver success on a Sunday. And they actually set the bar a little bit higher than the congregational leader would have even done, but they were like, this is what we think should happen. Also just allowing them, when possible, to have the freedom to make the choices and the decisions, so that they're owning the process. So this is what needs to happen, can you think of a way, and just empowering them, including them in the decision, including them in the processes, so that you're not just going, okay, you're this cog in the wheel and you just need to do A, B, and C. Okay, the other area under this kind of sustainability is around how we communicate with our volunteers. So there's the positive communication, and then there's the negative communication. And what's very important is that we actually filter that communication. So if you think of your worship bands, there's a lot of feedback that comes about worship. And this person loved it, and this person hated it, and this person thought it was too loud, and this person thought it was too soft. And so you need to filter that. And the one thing that I find quite helpful is it the scouts that have that thing. Is it kind, is it true, and is it necessary? That's a great filter. So this is what you're saying true? Is it kind, and is it necessary for me to share this with that team? And often, so I remember once there was a worship band, and I went to chat to the worship leader, and I said, this is what I felt, and it just seemed a little bit whatever. And she said, but this is what you need to know about this team. And she gave me some insight into how they were trying to do a different musical thing. I'm not very musical, and they were working with the drum and a synthesizer and whatever. And it just gave me such insight to realize that my feedback was completely inappropriate. And if I hadn't gone to her first, I would have just blurted it out to the team and potentially kind of really destroyed their spirits. But to have someone who can filter that communication, whether it's your volunteer coordinator, a band leader, and you only let through what needs to get let through. Then we need to make sure that we're maximizing the positive, and we're really maximizing moments of communication to thank and encourage. And again, not just to say thank you for serving tea, but to reflect it to the value. Thank you for serving tea in a way that was warm and hospitable. It was a funeral. People were like really needed to experience the love of Christ, and they did that through you. So to really try and use it as a moment to be specific, to not just say thank you, you're a great volunteer, but to think of specific examples as much as possible, to be as personal as possible. A note, a gift, a meaningful gift. So the one year when we did our big ladies event, we had these like cards made, and each volunteer who served got a framed version of that as a thank you gift. So it actually linked to the event that they served in, but it was able to live beyond that. So just think about how we thank, but not in a way that becomes just a token or like just impersonal, but to keep it very personal. So what I want you to do right now is take out your phone, and you're going to think of one of the key volunteers who serves in your sphere, and you're going to message them right now, telling them how much you love and appreciate them. You're going to practice this. You're going to try and be as specific as possible, as personal as possible, and try and link it not just to what they do, but the value that it really lives out or links to. Okay, let's get practical. So for the last 5 minutes, God's writing an essay there. Yeah. This is our question. We're going to think about what kind of leadership do volunteers thrive under. So this last part is how do we lead teams of volunteers. So let's collaborate on this one and think about what kind of leadership you've seen that volunteers thrive under. Chords everywhere. Okay. Any thoughts? Any adjectives? Organized? So I must have missed this section in my notes. But I had a section on how you honor them by being ready for teams. So there's nothing worse than a team arriving, and they're doing the washing up, and and there's no washing up liquid and brushes and whatever. So just make sure that teams have what they need to do the job, and that they're empowered to do the job. You had a situation a couple of weeks ago where there was a miscommunication thing and 2 teams arrived to serve at the same event, which was awful because we just felt like we'd wasted their times. But instead of going, okay, let's just pretend that we did that on purpose and let's make everyone work, but we just said, look, we've made a mistake. We only need 10 people. If you can stay, that's great, but if you would prefer to leave, feel free. And so the people who needed to leave left. It just honoured their time and didn't make them feel there. Okay, organised, what else?
Enthusiastic.
This might be a sort of sub-point organised, but clear expectations, like I know what's required of me.
Approachable. Also clear communication.
And I also feel like often with our communication, as much ahead of time as possible, so it's not last minute. It's really honouring. You can say to teams, these are the commitments for the term, or for even for this next 6 months, just so people have that. The others? Must be lots more.
I always feel like that's kind of being good at planning, because you can be organised as much as what you want, but if you're not good at planning, then I think that's kind of involves vision and all those types of things, planning, project management.
Appreciative.
Yeah.
Gratitude, yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but point leadership in the moment. We had an event where men were serving in the ladies' event. No one was there to show how much food needed to go on the plate.
Yeah.
And so some plates were coming out like this big, and some like, but they didn't know who to turn to in that moment to find out where it was. So it's kind of like that live leadership in the moment.
Anything else?
How do we say like there's a space for them to come up with their own ideas and run with something? You don't just shoot them down.
Yeah, open-handed. Yeah. So they feel like they can contribute, bring suggestions.
Yeah. Not, I want to say not micromanaging.
Yes, yes. Because often they become the total experts in that thing. And you just like, and you go, we're going to do it like this, and they're going to go, oh, that's not going to work, because they know. But to really rely on their experience.
It's almost like healthy delegation.
Yeah.
Maybe along with that empowering.
Yeah. I just want to see. All right, another one that came out when I was doing this exercise is flexibility. So the people I was chatting to just spoke about how different volunteers are different. So some volunteers give me the broad strokes and I'll go make it happen. And some people want very clear point leadership. Tell me to go from A to B to C. And to actually know your volunteers and to know what each of them need means you have to adjust accordingly. And that's a real gift. It's not just a blanket, this is how I'm treating my volunteers. That's our 5 minutes. Anything else?
It's a question that you might deal with later, but it is giving feedback to volunteers. How do you do that well in the moment versus what's the space for it? The feedback needs to happen. My question is more around
The wisdom on how to do it.
I think another one is what I call like a shock absorber or stress absorber. If you're the most stressed person in the whole team, you've got to actually absorb all the stress and calm everyone down in a way.
The other thing that this group said is hands-on leaders who see the need, okay, there's loads of more washing up than we anticipated, and they're actually prepared to get their hands dirty, or they are there till the end, helping clear the chairs. That speaks volumes to your volunteers, that you're also happy to be there. So I'm going to just call that hands-on. Okay, so we need to move on. So I want you to look at this list and do a little bit of a self-audit. If this is what our volunteers thrive under, where's the one, yeah, I'm good at that, so I'm good at showing appreciation, or I'm good at giving point leadership, and where's the one that you go, oh, that's the one I need to work on, because I'm terrible at giving feedback well, or I'm terrible at my enthusiasm. So you're going to check in with each other, just in twos, Carl, twos, okay, and you're going to say, this is the one I'm good at, this is the one I need to work on. Okay, go. And then we need to move on.
Okay, wait.
How do we give feedback well? So I'm going to give my 2 cents, and then I'm very happy for the rest of you to chip in. So I think with feedback, it's generally best to do it as quickly as possible while it's fresh. Because most of the time, people will want specific examples of what you're saying. So say you tend to be a bit overbearing in these moments. They're going to say, like when? Or what do you mean by that? And so you need to have those specific examples in your mind. So I feel like the sooner you do it, those examples are fresh. We like to use the sandwich technique, where you start with some affirmation, give some robust feedback, and then you end with affirmation, so that it's well packaged. What can happen though is people hear affirmation, affirmation, and they don't hear the spinach in the middle. And so you need to make sure that it is clear that this is what I'm addressing, it's specific, and potentially how to address it. So in this situation with these volunteers, you came across as very overbearing. Perhaps you could rather say it this way or do it this way. We also, our other little saying is, you commend in public and you criticize in private. So up front and with everyone else, lots of affirmation, etc. And then pulling someone aside, having a private conversation, so that that feedback, that constructive feedback, is done personally. Any other thoughts on how to give feedback to volunteers who are doing this all for the love of the Lord? Anyway.
We use it did well, did differently. So it's very similar to the sandwich thing, but we would call it did well, and we would say, well done, you did this well. And just call it do differently, we would say. We would just, maybe this area didn't do this a bit differently.
Don't do that again.
Yeah, so it's not
Do
that.
well, do differently, that's beautiful.
It's not a good and horrible.
Yes, just do
did well,
differently.
do different.
I like that.
But do it differently could mean, so by do differently is don't do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I'm framing it in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Anything else about giving feedback?
Yeah, so I think the timely thing is very important. I have a hard time with that simply because I just get very busy, and I'll remember at like 11 at night to give feedback, but it's too late. You know, you're sleeping. How do you do that? Of course, you know, management tools, you know, reminders to yourself if you know you struggle with that.
And I think the thing is to just, so even if you just jot down a few thoughts, because it's fresh in your mind, but when you get to it on Wednesday, when you finally have time to make that phone call, or to have that one-on-one, now you're like, what was I going to say again? I can't really remember. It felt so real in the moment. So I'm going just to write down a sentence, a phrase, just something that's going to remind me of what I'm trying to say, and then now we're going into productivity stuff, which is a whole other thing I do. But to just, it won't happen unless it's allocated. If it's on a list, even it won't happen unless you've allocated time for that list to happen. So you need to go, okay, on Wednesday morning, the first thing I'm going to do is send an email, make a phone call, arrange a coffee. And that's how I'm going to make this actually happen.
The other thing is maybe doing, just setting yourself up well on the front end with healthy conversations of giving structures for feedback. So with us, we'll say, hey, this is what we do, but this is part afterwards that we're going to speak about function and feedback. But we also have a robust culture, and we're able to speak into things just because we want to do things excellently. So there's this understanding.
You set the expectation.
Yeah, so by the time it gets there, it's not trying to set up every conversation you, but that you have a space and that person has a space where you can go, this is in its place, I don't have to have different feelings of that, I know what it is.
That's very good.
Space. So that's also something we have to do.
And also mature volunteers will often invite feedback. And that's the best, where they say, won't you give me some feedback on how I did that? Because then it's invited, and that's always much easier. So even if you're setting that up front, we'd love you from time to time to just invite some feedback so that we can, keep honing these skills or whatever. Any other questions around volunteers before we move on? Okay, I'm going to set my timer so I don't go on and on. Okay, the next section is now those wonderful volunteers who don't get paid. Now we're going to talk a little bit about staff who sometimes get paid. Okay, how to find, cultivate, and lead a great staff team. So obviously, Ryan and Matt dealt with some of this, but I'm going to do some of the more kind of practicalities. So let's look at how we find these fabulous people to come and work for our church. We can't compete with industry and perks and salaries and company cars, but there are other things that we can offer. So I've just got 5 tips for recruitment, and we'll talk a little bit about interviews as well. But let's start with recruitment. So the first thing to actually do is to be unashamedly poaching people on purpose.
Right.
So particularly when you identify those fantastic people in your church who you feel should be on staff, to actually go after them and to actually make the big ask.
So if you're planting, you have no church, so
who are you going to take with
who are
you?
you going to poach?
You're going to take someone with you from where you
Well, let's say you're planting internationally and you're going alone, because people can't really move to where you're going to. Is it ever acceptable to poach from other people's churches?
Well, that's controversial.
With permission?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Where's Lux, eh?
Take the Holy Spirit.
Take the Holy Spirit. So I think that is different, because you're probably working with volunteers initially. But often when you're working with those volunteers, then you go, now this person is fantastic.
Okay.
And if the finances are in place and you can actually employ, then those are the people you're going after. So if I think about our Common Ground story, so when Ryan took over the staff, he said there were 8 people. And I remember in those early years of recruitment, most of the conversations of people coming onto staff started at a braai with Ryan. No one wanted to go braai with Ryan, because he would have a conversation around the braai, and there would be someone who would go, oh, I'm not really loving my work anymore, or I'm finding a sense of lack of purpose, and he would go for it. And he would make the big ask, and he learned not to say people's no for them. Because so often we think, oh, they'll never leave that place, they'll never leave that job. But to actually make the ask, and to purposefully go after people that you think will be fantastic. So even now, we've just employed someone for 1 day a week. He's a high corporate dude. We were like, there's no way he's going to say yes, because to say yes to this, he has to actually say no to a promotion. But he said it, he's done it, because he believes there's a call in his life to be working in the church and impacting the world around him. And so he's made that sacrifice, but we went, oh, actually no, it's too big an ask, we're just not going to ask. We would never have got that person on our team. So poach those people on purpose, paint the picture of meaning and purpose, and we're in the kingdom, and unashamedly go after them. Okay? Then we have the same, where we say higher tens. So this is when you get a person and you go, oh, this person is a 10 out of 10 person. Like, this person is going to give everything to this job. I can see they're passionate, they're committed, they're organized. This is a person I want on my team. Versus in an interview, oh, this is a person who, they're okay. They may be like a 5 out of 10. So I'm going to hire them just because I think they're going to get the job done. No, hire 10s. As far as possible, hire people who are fantastic for the role, because 10 out of 10s attract 10 out of 10s. Okay? And 10 out of 10s are your people who are going to help you with culture, who are going to help you reproduce, replicate, because they're fantastic. The third thing is something that Ryan touched on yesterday, that you hire slow. So those two seem quite like, let's go for it. But actually to take the time to hire properly and to hire slow. Often, the dangers come when you're hiring out of urgency or need. And there's that desperate, we desperately need someone in kids. We desperately need someone to help us with administration. And you appoint someone, you haven't asked the right questions, you haven't followed the right process, and they're not quite the right fit. And those are difficult moments to have the conversations and then to invest energy in fixing that thing. So to try and do that really well up front. When you're hesitant about someone and there's a, I'm not sure, to really trust that. And to say, okay, let's not make a decision. Let's sleep on it. Let's go pray about it. Let's see if we sense that this is the right thing. The other thing that's really helped us in this is to think about things like probationary periods. So to say, okay, we think it's going to work, but we've got a 3-month probationary period where we're going to give you regular and consistent feedback to see if it's a fit for you and if it's a fit for us. And also, one of the things we've done is we've started doing these trial periods almost. So if you're going to be working with, say, on a Sunday with a whole lot of volunteers, we're going to invite you to come and shadow our existing person, and we're going to watch how you interact with volunteers, because it'll give you insight into what this job entails, but it'll also show us how you react to volunteers in that moment. So that's been really helpful. Okay, the fourth thing is to look for mobilizers. So one of the things Ryan spoke about yesterday is you want to hire people who are going to multiply ministry, not monopolize ministry. So you get those people who are going to just get the job done, and then you get those people who are going to get the job done, and they're going to get a whole lot of other people working in action, and they're actually going to multiply ministry. So we always say we're a volunteer army and we staff accordingly. We're not a staff army and we volunteer accordingly. No, we're a volunteer army and we look for people who can help release the volunteers. And it's one of the things that it's quite hard to measure, to be honest, because not many people have had to do that in previous experience, in previous jobs, because you're employed to do this thing. So when we get to interview and questions and stuff, there's some questions that can help you kind of get a sense of how this person works. Are they a person who just likes to get things done, and so they're achieving, but they're not mobilizing other people? Okay, and then the last bit that we're going to spend a little bit of time on is the interview process. So this is something that has developed over time, and really to think through that interview process, to think about who is in the room for that interview process. Often it's very helpful to have a completely outside person. They're not going to serve in this team, they're not even maybe even in this congregation, but you're inviting someone to sit in on the interview because they can give you a perspective that is helpful. You are desperate to hire this person, they go, I'm not sure, because they're not as desperate to hire this person. Also to think about how you do the interview process. So sometimes you want to see how people respond on their feet, and you want to throw questions and what comes, but actually sometimes that's not the most helpful, because in a high anxiety environment like an interview, people don't always perform well. So are there some questions that you can send them before? Say, we're going to ask you this question, we'd love you to think of an example that you can use to answer this question. So it's great if they've had time to think that through, and that they're prepared for the interview. I often, when we interview and I go, do you have any questions for us? And if the person doesn't have any questions for us, I'm like, how do you arrive at an interview and not have questions? Because it shows that kind of level of preparation. And the other thing with interviews, we're going to spend a little bit of time on that, but to really ask good questions and to work hard up front in thinking through what are the questions I'm going to ask, what am I trying to get to with this question. And I'm also going to refer a little bit to Patrick Lencioni, because he talks about asking the questions repeatedly in different ways. So I'm trying to figure out how you handle conflict. So I go, how do you handle conflict? And you give me an answer. And then I say, well, what would your spouse say about your ability to forgive others? So it's the same thing, because I'm looking at conflict. How do you handle it when someone offends you or says something that insults you? So all of those are situations where you're in conflict, but I just keep asking it different ways so I can really get to the grit of this question. Okay, so at Common Ground we've come up with a grid, and this Dave is going to send you, so don't worry.
Yay.
These are the 5 things we look for when we hire. The big 5, another 5, we love our 5s, everything on one hand. There's so many hands. Okay, so we look for character, calling, competence, chemistry, and contribution. And what we've done is we've developed questions that help to answer all those things, and that's what he's going to send you, and it's got all the questions So you can look at that. The first 4 on this side, chemistry, contribution, character, calling, are a little bit more intangible. Competence is where you're actually saying, well, what are your skills and what are you offering? But I'm going to touch on them briefly, and then the notes will come to you with the questions. So calling, because we are a church, there is a sense of we're saying, so are you feeling called to this? Or did you just respond to the job application because you're desperate for work? And really getting the sense that this person is responding to God's call to come into ministry, and for some people, full-time ministry. So we ask things like, what motivated you to apply for this position? And that tells us a little bit about, it gives them the opportunity to share if there is a God story involved. The character questions, so again, these are hard because this is a person who is reflecting on themselves, and often there is a little bit of blind spots in that. These ones I find are really helpful to send beforehand because people need time to think through examples. So if you said, tell me about a time when you had to handle a confidential situation. How did you handle the pressure of ensuring that you kept the information in? So a person will need to think of an example of that. So to give time for that. The other thing that often, I should do it here. Yeah, let me just do it here. So a couple of years ago, Lencioni did this thing on the ideal team player. Okay, so the ideal team player has got these 3 qualities. They are humble. So they are able to suspend self and work with people and engage with people. They're willing to okay, I might not want to do that, but for the team I'm going to lean in here. They're hungry. Okay, they've kind of got a passion to make things happen, get things done. They're hungry for success, but they're also smart. And in this sense, it's kind of people smart. So they're able to just their EQ, that they're able to engage with people, they read people's emotions, they're able to manage their own emotions. And so often I explain that to someone, I say, this is what Patrick Lencioni says is the ideal team player. I mean, you could use any grid. And then I say, so which one of those do you feel you're really good at? And which one is the one that we're going to have issues with? And that, just giving them a grid to self-audit is very helpful. Are you humble, are you hungry, are you smart? And which one are you not? And also, what would your current boss say you are? And what would your spouse say you are? And what would your best friend say you are? And what would your colleagues say you are? And it just, again, asking the same question, but in different ways. Okay, chemistry. That's being able to fit with this team, and that's really important. It's also quite hard to assess in an interview, and that's where we often, so if someone is looking in, we've had times before where we've flown people in and we've said, just come spend the day with us, come and see what our staff meeting's like, come and see what the vibe on the base is like, because we need to see how you interact with people. We need to see, you need to see, is this somewhere where you could work and you think that there is a fit for you? Because you want someone who's going to kind of blend into what's happening and not be that toxic ripple. And we've had those before, where people have come in and the chemistry fit has just not been right. And you have to move towards that quite quickly because it can really hurt you. So one way is this trial period, where come and spend a morning with our volunteers, come and shadow for a day. I remember one recruitment guy saying he would always meet the person somewhere in public, in a restaurant, or they would go for a walk and just watch how this person engages with people. Are they friendly? Are they polite? Or are they dismissive of people? I remember we once interviewed someone in the cafe. It was quite a casual interview. But when the waiter came, this person ignored the waiter. You could see she was like, you're the people interviewing me. You are the people I need to focus on. And it was just a warning sign to us. Like, how do you not see this person who's here and in your space? So that's quite, you just be aware of situations like that, because they can be really helpful. Okay, contribution, their ability to actually come in and immediately make a contribution. So obviously there's a time of them adjusting and learning, but you want them to be able to come in and actually do something. So there's a whole lot of questions. that enables her. How will you contribute? What does your supervisor or your current line manager compliment you on the most? How would he define your contribution to a team? And just to get the sense of how this person works. And then finally, the competence question. This is when they can actually get the job done, and here you're looking for specific skills in this role, the ability to do something. And often this is, the competence thing is, tell me about something that you've done, something that you've made happen. Explain how you did it, explain what the processes were. Again, this is a great example where you can give it to them beforehand. Or you say, here's the scenario, here's the case study. How would you go about making this happen? Just to see how they think, just to see what skills they would use. Okay, so those are the 5 things that we would look for as we interview.
Question. Just on the competency and contribution, I can see a lot of sort of overlap there. Is there a way that you would just define it slightly, like is one like more hard skills and the other more?
So, the only difference, not the only difference, one of the differences I think is I can be extremely competent and I can get a whole lot of stuff done, but I'm not actually contributing.
Okay.
And so one of those things is the person who does really well at getting stuff done, but they're not mobilizing others.
Sure. Okay.
So that is how I'm going to lean into a team, how I'm going to draw things out of others. This is my skills. So these are probably hard and those are softer, hard to measure.
Sure. No, that's all.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, it's also something that done with people coming out from the marketplace into the church. You've got high competence in one
skill,
like marketing or something. They're all, but have you contributed in the local church already? Can draw those two.
Yes,
slightly.
that's a good one. And where are you serving right now? And are you part of your local church? Yeah.
Who have you coached to success? Who's following you right now? Where have you excelled in the ministry setting?
That's good. Okay, how are we doing for time? 20 minutes to go. Okay, let's talk about staff and how you cultivate when you're leading a staff team, and this is very much about staff culture. So the staff culture is what kind of team, what kind of vibe do we create? We talk about kind of organizational culture as the smell and feel of the place. It's the unspoken rules, it's the way we do things, it's how we behave with each other, the values we live by, what are the common practices that just make up this vibe. So it's, as always, you kind of got to begin with the end in mind. So what kind of a staff team am I trying to build? So that's a good question to ask yourself even now. If I was planting a church and I had to begin to build a staff team, what kind of a staff team am I trying to build? What are the values that we would hold dearly? What is the vision that we would hold before us? Do we want to be very professional and excellent? Do we want to be warm and friendly? What is the vibe we're creating?
Sorry, it might not be directly in line with this, but just out of curiosity, in your opinion, if someone who's planting a church, of course, to begin with, finances are low and all that, what are essential hires that you would say are the most important ones to start off with?
So I know I asked Ryan that question. Actually, I didn't get to ask him. I'd asked him in our prep and he answered it with the, what did he say? The implementer, the comms, and the vision. Okay, so those were the VI.
Yes.
So I think, because my bent is administration, making stuff happen, what I see is very often a church planter leader getting caught up in a whole lot of logistics and organization that suck them dry, because often that's not what brings them to life. And I feel like employing the right kind of administrative, make it happen, organized person can often just take a whole lot of pressure off the person and just make a whole lot of stuff happen. So you need to be, as a planter, connecting with people, having coffees, but there's still like this whole lot of stuff that needs to happen to make Sunday happen, and these phone calls need to happen, and these emails need to be sent, and often you can find someone who can do that in a part-time capacity, or that just come in once a week. Often it could even be a volunteer, and they just want to give some hours to the church and with very clear expectations, etc. So I feel like it eliminates a lot of the noise, okay, and it helps to manage. But then you would probably start to look at someone who's going to move things forward and actually take steps. And depending on your context, is that a next-gen person who's going to move kids? Is it actually a worship person who's going to move forward? So almost like determining now what is the low-hanging kind of fruit in this context, that if we give leadership to it and we put someone in, and it could even be like, what is really important here is pastoral connection. And so my next hire is another pastor who is going to go visit people and see people in hospital and do funerals and weddings, etc., because that's the need right now, and I don't have enough capacity to do that. Okay.
Thank you.
But that's just my opinion. Okay. So what we've, I think I've got them here, our staff values. So our journey as a staff, at one point we had 11 values, and there were sub-points under all of them, and I couldn't even remember them if you asked me to. And then we had 7 values, and now we've boiled down to 5 values. You see another 5? And so here they are, Christ is central, we're here to serve, we're better together, we mobilize others, and we keep it fresh. And I think whatever your values are, it's great to spend time verbalizing them, articulating them, condensing them as much as possible to make them sticky and to make them accessible, because you're going to refer to them often if they really are values that you're going to live by. And so one of the things, this next slide says, okay, so how do you make this happen? So we celebrate the values when we see them in action. So when people are teaming well, or they've kept it fresh and they've added a creativity or an innovation to something, you celebrate it, because what gets rewarded gets repeated. So we have this thing in our staff meeting, it's called Caught in the Act. And here we are not trying to celebrate when someone has done their job, because that's what we're paying them to do. We're paying them to do their job. But we want to celebrate when someone has lived out one of these values. And so we try and say, okay, so this is where someone was here to serve. They went over and above in serving someone else. Or this is where we saw innovation and creativity, and we want to celebrate it. You want to invest in it. So for example, one of our things, the better together value of doing things together, investing in times as a staff together, keeping it relational, we try and do, so at the moment we do an annual staff time away where all the staff go away for a night. We invest in that value of togetherness and meals together and laughter together. One of our staff days was we went jumping on trampolines at Rush, because it's fun and we laugh and we take silly photos of each other and we do dwarf things, okay? But whatever your value is, that you actually invest in it. One of our values this year, it's kind of been more like a theme, is staff wellness. And so we have had guest speakers come in to speak about wellness, emotional wellness, physical wellness. We have part of our budget is set aside for staff who need to go for debriefing or counseling, because we believe that's an important part of wellness. So you need to invest in it. It's not always investment of money, sometimes just an investment of time and energy. We talk about it continuously, it's because vision leaks and these values leak. So we often look for ways, how can we keep just drip feeding these values? One of the things we do again in our Monday morning staff meeting is we have a devotional slot. And from time to time we'll say, please will you link your devotion to one of the values, so that you are sharing something that makes these values come alive. It's part of our review process. So when we do our annual reviews, we say, here are the 5 values. How can you give feedback to the staff member on which value you feel they've lived out, and which value you want to celebrate in them, so that you're continually talking about it, and that you fight for it. And so when people do like almost break the value, you move towards that quickly. When people aren't having that attitude of serving, or they aren't mobilizing other people, but you actually move towards it and you address it, so that you're keeping the value high. Okay. I just want to go back to these values, because whenever you say, ta-da, there's a value, there's always like a kind of a dark side to each value that it's really important to be aware of. So for example, keep it fresh. There's this lovely value of let's be innovative and creative, and the gospel is a fresh message. But what that can become is this driver that we've got to always be tweaking and always changing and always finding a fresh thing and almost tweaking for the sake of tweaking. And it can become this thing that drives excellence. And then what that does is, because excellence and innovation is so key, then I can just do it myself. Because if I want it to be fresh and excellent and really good, it's easier if I just do it myself, because then I can maintain the standard. So one of the things we were noticing is that our administrators were starting to put on these amazing events that were really excellent, they were fresh, the decor was incredible, but they weren't mobilizing volunteers at all. They were running a beautiful, slick, excellent event, but where were the volunteers? Where were the people like serving? Because excellence had become the thing rather than let's mobilize others. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay, so this is all around the staff culture, the vibe. Any questions here before we move on?
Louise, something that's so helpful is that difference between permission to play and the staff values. Can you tell us, are you doing that later?
No, why don't you unpack?
Oh, just that thing of that sometimes you can have staff values and then guys think, hey, those are the 5, and then everything else goes out the window. But when we were putting this together, it was that thing of actually integrity and those types of things of just permission to play. Like that's the normal ground level expectation. But when we hone in on a culture, what makes us us, these are the 5 that we're going to bring priority to. And I think it's always it's so good to, when you go into those values in that space, to describe, hey, actually this is permission to play, there's this level that we're calling out of people, but these are the priorities and focus.
So in the previous version of the 11, there was things like honesty and authenticity, and we say, well, actually those are important, but those are permission to play. We would assume that anyone coming into work in a church environment, we're going to say honesty is obviously essential. So we're not going to, that's almost like permission to get onto the field, but these are the ones we're going to celebrate. Maybe a little bit about how we got to these 5. So we did an initial big group kind of brainstorm with the whole staff. Everyone put forward what you think our values are, and there was a little bit of where the energy is. So here's a value, how many other people resonate with that value? So we could get a sense of where there was lots of energy. Then we had a team that went and kind of whittled it down, and I think at that point they came up with 7 or 8, and they were quite long descriptors. And then we took that to the staff, and then we said, okay, where do you think we've missed it? We got them to interact with it and tweak it and change it. Again, this was at our staff time away, and then we came back together in a small sub-team and said, okay, let's tweak it, let's shorten it even more, let's reduce it to 5, and then we came up with these. So there was ownership in the process, there was buy-in in the process, that it wasn't head office coming down going, ta-da, here are the values to live by. But obviously, staff change. And so the staff team that created these values are not the same, all of them, as the staff team we have now. And that's why we have these regular moments of buy-in and reminder, and here, this is what the values are all about. Okay. In the last little section, I've got 10 minutes left. We're going to focus on elements of leading a staff team. So what's important is every staff team is different, every season is different, your model of staff team is different. Are you lots of volunteers and only 2 paid staff? And so what's really good is to have a sense of just having good questions to ask, particularly because staff teams change and mold and develop and evolve. Think of things like this. What season are we in right now as a church, as a staff team? And what leadership is required in this season? So this could be obviously for us as a church as a whole, but I'm focusing specifically on the staff team. What structures will serve us at this time, which is different maybe to what it was before, and what changes do we need to make? So one of the things about Common Ground that is exhausting, but I absolutely love about it, is we are continually changing how we do things. We're continually changing how we meet, when we meet, who's in the meeting, just because the structures have got to serve the life. So one of the big changes we've had is moving from everybody kind of all together in one staff team, which we still one staff team, but because we serve in different congregations, we're trying to empower those congregational teams. So the emphasis has moved from one big thing to all the smaller things. So that just changes the way we do things. We used to have a mid-year staff day, everyone come together. Now we say, okay, that mid-year staff day happens in these smaller teams. So here's our South Peninsula team, there are 5 of them, so the 5 of them are spending the day together so that they can connect relationally, they can do something fun, they can laugh together, but it's that team. So it's just had to shift and move, and there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility so that you're changing things all the time. Our meeting patterns change all the time, how often, how regular, what do we talk about, etc. And so some of the practicalities to consider here, because there's a whole lot of strategies, there's systems, there's tools that help actually manage people, manage time, manage stuff. These are the things that I would, and I'll send Dave this PowerPoint so you've got it. But to think about what are our rhythms, what are we doing on a daily basis? So a lot of our teams do a little check-in meeting where they start the day by going, this is what I'm working on, this is what my focus is, and at the end of the day, this is what I did, this is what I'm still doing tomorrow. What are our weekly rhythms? So we have a weekly staff meeting. Monthly rhythms, quarterly rhythms, annual rhythms. And what we've also started to say is what are things that could happen every second year? They don't necessarily have to happen every year. These could be meetings, these could be moments, but to actually have that grid. Who do I need to meet with on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a quarterly basis? Then, this is where a lot of my energy is directed to, is meeting formats. What are the right meetings to be having? Who's the driver of the meeting? Whose meeting is it? And who are the people that need to be around the table? There's nothing worse than sitting in a meeting and you go, oh, we should have invited that person. Because now we can't make this decision. We can't take this discussion forward. So clarifying who is driving this meeting, who's in this meeting, what's the purpose of the meeting. So up front it should be, guys, just a reminder, this is what this meeting is about to achieve. We are sitting in this meeting because we are thinking about our Christmas services. So that's the purpose of the meeting. Have I got the right people in the room? Have I got my worship person? Have I got my kids person because kids are in Christmas? Who are the right people here? Here is the clarity on what this meeting is. There's an agenda. So over the years, I've watched this develop. Because when I started, there was no agenda. And then we would have a list, but the list hadn't been prioritized, and the list hadn't been measured against actual time. So we would start with the list, and the list we would spend ages talking about something completely irrelevant, and then third on the list was a very important thing, and now it's out of time. So that is where your gift of your people who can keep things moving, set a realistic agenda, set time limits, and this is something that's also been hard for me to learn is, I'm like, oh, this point it'll take, what, half an hour, and then we'll move on? And I go, no, I've learned that when we talk about this kind of thing, we need to dedicate the whole meeting to it. Because otherwise we don't have the conversation, we don't have the conversation properly. Yeah, what do we leave out? I've had to learn what shouldn't be in a meeting. We don't need a meeting for that, we just need an email. We need a conversation, we don't need a meeting, because Common Ground, we love meetings, okay? Is it too long, is it too short? Because both are frustrating. And very importantly, out of this meeting, what are the next steps? What are the action items? Who's doing what? When is it being done by? And just clarifying that, because otherwise you can get to the end of a meeting and go, what did we actually decide? And what is actually happening? Okay, then planning and calendar processes. Because everything is time-based, event-based, do you have clear planning and calendar processes in place? Especially the one here that I think is the most helpful is forecasting. And to actually say, looking ahead to the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Leadership models and structures, and linked to that, decision-making processes. Do we know what those are? Do we know who gets to make the decision in this case? There's nothing worse than going, oh, I thought I could make that decision, and now I can't. So your kids' ministry going, oh, I thought that was in my field of expertise, so I made the decision. Who do you need to consult? All of those things. Sunday and event planning processes. So This is something, Garth's excellent at this. His team are amazing at project plans for events. So that every time you run an event, you're not starting from scratch. You've got a template and you're going, this is what needs to happen before the event, this is what needs to happen at the event, this is what needs to happen after the event. And just streamlining those things so that you're not spending endless time, endless energy, endless resources on that. Technology, how do we use technology to help us? I've watched WhatsApp has fundamentally changed the way we communicate as an organization. We can get quick answers, voice notes, oh my gosh, come on, I love their voice notes.
Yeah.
And I believe that voice notes should not be longer than a minute.
Amen.
If they are longer than a minute,
Preach it.
it's a preach basically. So how do we use technology?
I like long voice notes.
Yeah, I can tell you were a long voice note. There's nothing worse. 4 minutes and you're like, oh my gosh. And then the question that they asked in the first 30 seconds, you can't even remember.
Fine.
Things like Trello, things like Canva, which is the design app, which is brilliant because it's free. Like, how do we use technology that just enables us to do our job well? What are communication tools? And obviously, finances and budgeting, because budget underlines all of this. What is our process? Do we have a model? Do we have budgeting software? Do we know where the money is? Those are all very important. Okay, I'm going to leave it there because I think we're out of time, and I just want to leave last few minutes for any questions around staffing, organization. Yes?
Lou, it can also be with hiring staff, but more a volunteer basis. How do you, obviously we want to do things excellently, but there's also the space of kind of giving people grace to grow and fail forward. How do we manage that, or how do you manage that tension where you're like, it's actually okay for them to make a couple of mistakes, and like you can be in church and the media slides are going all over and you're going, it's actually fine to live in this space for a while because this is the understanding. Actually, we want to be excellent, so is there ways that we have to like manage that or default that?
So I do think that it is a management thing, and it's helpful to articulate that. So in this season, we don't mind if things are not completely polished, because what we actually want you to do in this event is to release volunteers. So if I think about, if I can use an example, our ladies event. So for many years, this was a citywide event that the team ran on behalf of all congregations, and all congregations sent their women to this women's event. And what we noticed over time is that our staff team were incredible, and they ran a beautiful event. And this person was in charge of decor, and this person was in charge of food, and this person did ticketing, etc. And a beautiful event happened, but nobody had to do anything to make it happen because the staff team made it happen. So we said that's great, but that's not the vision. The vision is this is an event which must be run by volunteers. So this year we shifted it and we said no citywide event. If your congregation wants to run this event, we can give you some help, but you need to run it. And so one of the congregations said, we want to run it, okay? They found a volunteer project manager who managed the event. They found someone to do decor, and the staff members still organized the food and the ticket sales, etc., but it was a much more inclusive event. Now, it's scary, because the person doing decor was doing decor like half an hour before the event was about to start. And I could see my staff member going, oh my gosh, is it going to be ready? But it was, and it was beautiful, and it was absolutely fine. Maybe it wasn't as polished and the fairy lights weren't all up and whatever, but it was beautiful. And it was a lovely picture of, I'm standing back so that you can make this thing happen. And there was much more ownership, etc. But we had to keep saying that. It's okay that it's not this, or it's okay that this volunteer is going slower, because that's actually what we want. You have to keep reaffirming, because there's some people who struggle with that, and they want to make it excellent. And so it is that clarity of what's the win here. And if the win is that our volunteers are getting equipped, so the slides are all over the place, but next week, only 3 slides are all over the place, and the week after that, we've got it right. And also, but I think choosing your moments. When are the moments that it's okay to mess up? And when are the moments where you're like, actually, this is a big thing. So I know when we host an advanced conference, that is not the moment to let the volunteers loose and hope the slides are okay. There's not that moment. This is where we want things to run smoothly and be well executed. So it's choosing those moments. Any other questions? Sure, thank you for your attention. We crammed a lot into 90 minutes. Well done, everybody.